KIN 346, Biomechanics. What is this course about? You know, admittedly, I know a lot of students put off taking this class, partly because of the idea that it has a lot of math and physics. It has some math and it has some physics, but we'll go through it. But I hope that during the course of this semester, I will give you a good foundation in what biomechanics is all about. And I hope by the end of this semester, you'll actually enjoy, sorry, we got a visitor here. I hope that you will enjoy using biomechanics. What this presentation is geared towards is giving you a better sense of the big picture of what biomechanics is all about, why we have a class specifically on this, and other classes as well, why study biomechanics, and then how to study biomechanics. All right, so let's go through this a little bit. So what is biomechanics? Well, a lot of things come to mind when you ask that question to someone, and someone asks you what you're taking a class in biomechanics, what's it all about? Well, it's about technique of movement, it's about forces of movement, it's about movement itself, it's about the math, it's about physics, but it's also about the bio part here. So it's also about, in this case, humans, or in our case. The vast majority of work that we do in this department is targeting understanding humans in terms of exercise, in terms of the science behind movement and what have you. There's other departments on campus and units, other universities that focus on biomechanics of animals, like elephants walking or dogs running or what have you. But biomechanics in a broad sense is these types of things. It's trying to understand the forces during cycling, or maybe measuring ground reaction forces during running, or doing equations, or doing some algebra, or coming up with a unique way to measure certain aspects of swim performance, or why we have different gears on bikes, or even different shoes. Lots of different things that biomechanics, biomechanists sort of fall into in terms of working on. So here's a word definition, or word definitions of biomechanics. This is a very technical definition of science which investigates motion and the action of forces, internal and external, including statics, dynamics, kinematics, and kinetics that occur during the action performed by a living organism, the bio part. For example, a human being, and that's what we're going to focus on. Biomechanics of physical activity is the study of the movements and structure and function of human beings using the mechanical principles of physics and engineering. Just an alternative definitions that's sort of focusing more in on the mechanical and physics part. But what I like to tell people when they say, "What do you do?" I say, "Well, I teach biomechanics." I'm talking with someone at a get together, what have you, and they say, "Oh, that's cool. What is that?" And I just simply say, "It's the physics of sport." It's close enough, but it's the mechanics implied by mentioning physics, and sport, meaning that we're talking typically human sport. So the bio aspect of this. Let's dive into this a little bit deeper. So these are the definitions. It's a science. It's understanding using mechanical principles to understand biological movements, okay? And again, we're going to focus on humans. So if we were in person in class, at this time, what I would do is I would take a ball and I would throw it to someone in the room, sort of like this. This is a rudimentary video of this. A ball, bounce it off the wall, and catch it again. And then I would ask the question, what just happened? And most people would start saying, well, you caught the ball, or in this case, you threw the ball against the wall and then you caught it again. But really, it's much more complex than that. So here, this ball is coming towards the hand. And what does the person have to do in order to catch the ball? The person has to understand the trajectory that this ball is traveling. So they are automatically using equations of constant acceleration and thinking about the parabola that this ball is following as it's going through the air. And not only that, but the person has to then identify where the hand has to be placed in order to intercept that ball, and the hand has to get to the right place at the right time. The hand itself has to actually open up in a particular way in order to create sort of a surface to contact the ball. And then the person has to determine how much force to apply to this object as it's coming towards the hand in order to stop it. And then close the fingers at an appropriate moment in time in order to capture that object. It's a very complex process that is going on. So you need this visual aspect. You need to predict movement. You got to be able to identify where to move the hand. You got to fire all the muscles in the upper body in order to put that hand in the right place at the right moment in time in order to catch the ball. So a very simple task of throwing a ball against the wall and catching it is actually quite complex. And the other part that you have to do is I use this object here. I can hold it ahead of time, but if I threw this object to someone in the classroom and they caught it, and they've never had any experience catching this object, they would then have to even estimate what the mass of the object is in order to apply the right impulse to stop that object from moving, to stop the momentum of that object. Oh, I got a cat here. And this is a cat toy. And so it's not even a round object. So as I threw it up against the wall, it came back to me. I had a little bit of uncertainty in terms of where that ball was going to go. And once it left the wall, though, then I could do all the predictions in my brain right away about where that ball was headed in order to put my hand in the right spot at the right moment in time in order to catch that ball. Very complex. All right. So, but we can take this very simple idea of a ball, and then we could catch a ball, and then we could actually start looking at sports, or we could look at activities. We could be looking at something like running. And we can start looking at the movements of running and then trying to understand why the person runs the way he or she runs. Why does the foot hit the ground in a particular way? How do we protect the person from running injuries by having a shoe on the person? And how should this shoe be designed in order to minimize the risk of injury or to aid in performance? Or we could look at, maybe this is also a sport, trampoline is. We could look at something very different as trampoline bouncing. And we're actually doing some work on this at this point, and we're trying to understand not only just jumping on the trampoline, but some of the tasks that you would use or acts that you would include in a circus type show. And so the same things are going on with this type of movement. This person has to understand and predict how much spring force this trampoline is going to return, and then flex or extend the knees in a particular way in order to bounce correctly. And then ultimately, in this case, we were looking at some landing from bouncing on this treadmill. And now you have this change in surface that you have to manage, and your brain has to predict what this surface is going to do in order to have the correct movements. And what happens if the brain makes an error in either deciding how to place the foot? What if this surface was slippery and the person didn't know? Ice, not that we get a lot of ice here in Vegas. Well, the brain is making some predictions in terms of what the foot has to do and what muscles have to do. And if that prediction is wrong, you could end up with an error in performance. You could not catch the ball. You could maybe fall off the tramp or jump in the wrong direction, or you could slip or trip during running. All of these things fall in the category of human performance. And we will, in this class, take a biomechanics perspective of trying to understand human performance. In a separate video, I go through what I call a model of kinesiology. I go through a wide number of factors that influence performance. So performance is down here: catching the ball, running, bouncing on a trampoline, landing from a bounce from a trampoline. performance is what we're interested in terms of how well we do something. Where there's all sorts of things that happen that lead up to a successful performance. And then we also have this learning process that's constantly going on every time we do some type of movement or some type of performance. For this class, we're going to be focusing in right here on some of this issue here with muscles in terms of force-velocity relationship, length-tension relationship. We're going to really focus in on kinetics and kinematics of understanding performance. Often I get asked what I do, and I say I do biomechanics, and why do I call myself a biomechanist? Well, really, I'm really interested in human performance. So I really call myself a physiologist at the end of the day. But I say that I have a biomechanics background because my mindset, when I want to understand something about performance, I often think about equations or concepts or terms that are mechanically focused. So I tend to start looking at understanding performance from this perspective, whereas someone else with a motor control perspective may start looking at how the central nervous system works and so forth. So different areas have different places they start in terms of trying to understand human performance. And human movement, which this department is geared towards training students in understanding, human movement is achieved through a complex interaction between the human and the environment. It involves sensory information, perception, movement goals, motor signals. This is just an example. This is not an exhaustive list. All right, we need to be able to use our structures to move in a particular way to interact with the environment to have some type of movement. In this case, catching a ball. All right, so that's biomechanics. We are going to use physics. We're going to use mechanical principles to trying to understand human performance for humans, okay? And again, if you go into another department, you may be looking at animal biomechanics or what have you. And that's all fine, and that's actually really an interesting area. We're going to focus on human performance. All right, so now how do you study biomechanics? Well, let me deviate from that question just a bit. If I put up these pictures of these different teams, these are all pretty much professional teams or professional athletes, I bet you can tell me quite a bit about each one of these images and the teams that the image represents. Obviously, the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup, all right? Yes, we had to wait 6 long years to be able to get to a Stanley Cup. Yes, that's a joke because there are many hockey teams that have not won a Stanley Cup and some that had to wait 20 years or longer in order to win a Stanley Cup. The Aces, WNBA team, they are current world champions in their sport. The Aviators are a minor league team, and who knows, maybe we'll get a professional team here soon. The Raiders, I bet you a lot of you can tell me the history of the Raiders and where they played and some of the players in the Raiders Hall of Fame. UFC, I'm sure many of you can tell me quite a bit about the men's competition as well as the women's competitions. Who's the top fighters and some of the history behind how UFC developed as a sport. Soccer, I'm sure many of you maybe watched the TV show Ted Lasso and caught the soccer bug and what have you. And then finally, I always like to, obviously I'm highlighting Las Vegas professional sports, but I also like to highlight professional sports has been here in Las Vegas for quite some time. And we have had elite athletes performing in circus artist shows. And they are just as much athletic and as important as some of these other sports as well. So the point that I'm making here is that I bet you didn't take a class on hockey or football statistics or any of these areas. But you know a lot about this information. All right, let's keep going here in this presentation. I bet you could also, if I just put up these pictures that seem sort of random, but these are pictures of different sets or a particular movie. And I bet you if we just sort of if I put this up in a class and you just started yelling out which TV show or movie these would have come from, I bet you would get each one of these. And then you could probably tell me quite a bit about the characters or the actors and actresses that played the different characters. Again, you didn't take a class on this. How did you learn this information, and how do you retain that information, which is really quite a bit and really impressive. Well, there's all sorts of theories in terms of how to learn. All right. There's all sorts of theories. Sometimes there's just rote memorization, and sometimes you are trying to learn something at a deeper level of knowledge and trying to understand complex concepts. All right. There's this broad spectrum of what you need to learn and how to learn it. And it's better to learn, or it's better to know how to learn than to know. All right. Dr. Seuss. Yeah. No, trying to understand the learning process is really important. There's different ideas in terms of what's the best techniques. What I'm going to promote to you in this class is to take what I call, and others, an immersion technique to understanding biomechanics. I want you to dive right into the topic. And I don't want you to be intimidated by the math and the physics. We're going to do math and physics. We'll do graphing. We'll try to read figures. We'll talk about instruments to measure things. But I want you to really try to dive into the topic of biomechanics. So how do you do that? Well, immerse yourself in the topic, schedule time in your week that you spend specific to this class. All right. This is a web live class, so there's lecture time that's dedicated in your schedule for this. We won't always have lecture during those live sessions. I'll offer video rooms, but those rooms are really for you to come in and ask some questions. If there's no questions asked, then we don't meet very long. Sometimes it just turns into me telling stories about how something's related to the topic of the week or what have you. But schedule time in your calendar that you're going to spend specific on this class. But then also throughout the day, try to find yourself gravitating towards trying to find where biomechanics fits in your real world. So the other thing that I want you to do is learn the terminology. Yes, this is the rote memorization part of learning. We need to be able to have a language that we can talk to each other and using terms that mean the same thing, and units that mean the same thing. And we all have an understanding of different equations. So you've got a terminology worksheet. I've got a whole nother video on terminology, and I want you to just memorize those. Okay, we need to start with knowing terms. Then what we can do when we have those building blocks, we can start applying those terms to understanding human performance. Then I'm also going to suggest get involved with research. This is a great way to dive deeper into a topic where you're trying to answer, or someone's trying to answer some question through a biomechanical analysis. And then finally here also, you might, find, I've got this elsewhere in this presentation, find my YouTube channel that has different playlists for different courses, as well as different podcasts. I do the evidence-based triathlete podcast with Ted Gerard. We don't make any money off it. It's totally just two guys talking about triathlon, but we bring our science knowledge. He comes from the sports medicine side. I come from the biomechanics, exercise physiology side, and we try to use that science to try to understand human performance. The podcast is for the lay audience, so they are not trained in like you folks are, or going through a degree program. So you want to start trying to find these different avenues where biomechanics is showing up in your life, and try to integrate and immerse yourself into that world. So for example, go to YouTube and type in the search engine, biomechanics of, and put in your favorite sport, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, and see what videos come up. I bet there's be some wonderful videos out there that people have done on different sports in explaining some of the biomechanics around that. All right, so what is this course about? Hopefully you're getting a sense of what we're going to do. We need to understand biomechanics. We got to understand terms. We need to understand how to use those terms correctly. We need to know equations. We need to know units of parameters. So a large portion of this class is to make sure that we're getting that working definition of terms, understanding of the equations, and understanding units. When we get to testing, I'll ask a lot of questions. Do you know this term? Do you know this equation? Do you know the units? Not necessarily even how to use the equation, not the algebra behind manipulating the equation, or even doing some different types of math and physics. This is not a math course. This is not a physics course. We will do math. We will do physics. But that is not what I'm going to be ultimately testing on. Yes, there are math questions, and yes, there are physics questions on the test. But mostly what I'm trying to tease out is your understanding of terminology. Are you able to use that terminology correctly? Can you understand equations? Can you understand units? And sometimes I have to ask you a math question to see if you're understanding how to apply those equations. You will know definitions of biomechanics terms, equations, units, and how to apply these terms to understand human performance. And that's really the end goal of this course. Or once you take this course, you can take another course that's a 400 level course or a graduate course that's focused on biomechanics of some type of performance. For example, I do biomechanics of endurance performance and apply biomechanics in terms of how do we help someone do a marathon or an Ironman or some long distance event. All right, and concluding here, enjoy the learning process. You got to enjoy it. It's got to be fun. I want to encourage you to seek out information that you find interesting. Find the biomechanics of whatever sport or activity you participate in. And they will be using a lot of the terms that we are going to be covering in this class. And hopefully this class will help you understand the content that you're actually finding. In some other videos, I'll go through the course logistics, talking about the syllabus, the assignments. The key with the assignments is keep up with the videos, read the handouts, go to laboratories, and log into Canvas on a regular basis. I'll do announcements that way, trying to give you every opportunity to learn the material throughout the semester. Last couple things, I've already mentioned a couple of these, but read everything. Read everything. Magazines, research papers. I should also put in watch here, because I bet you could type in biomechanics of something in TikTok or I don't know, whatever social media platform you're on, Facebook or what have you, and you'll find some amazing content that way. So read, explore biomechanics. I do have a YouTube channel, you can find out. And then also we have UNLV Biomechanics on Facebook. It's not a very active page, but I do try to post interviews on there that I do with alumni or other people who are related to the biomechanics topic. Okay, I hope that's helpful. I hope that you are inspired to get involved with biomechanics, and over this next period of the semester, I hope by the end of the semester, you will have learned biomechanics and enjoy biomechanics. Okay, thanks so much.